Hi, the world's most wicked problems need innovative solutions. Join me in this show to meet leaders, path breakers, and visionaries who've solved these problems. Not just solved them, but they've solved it at scale. When you join me, you're going to listen to their lives, the problems they solved, and the fun they had doing it. Today with us, we have Madan Padaki, who is a social entrepreneur, a visionary himself, and a change maker at scale. And Madan is also a great friend. Madan, pleasure to have you with us.
Terrific to be here, Shiv, Raghu.
Hey, and welcome.
And I also have with me my co-founder of Catalyst Group and also my co-host, Raghunathan. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here.
Madan, tell us about your journey. I know it's started with the private sector and moved into the social development. Give the audience a sense of who you are and what you do.
Sure, Shiv. I'm the classic engineer MBA. Engineer because I didn't want to be a doctor, nor a lawyer, nor an accountant. So E was the only option left. We had a thing called Dell. Either you're a doctor, engineer, lawyer, or a loser.
Okay.
So I ended up choosing engineering. Worked for a couple of years. Got a first look at the burgeoning IT sector then. Went on to do my MBA. Right. That's what most engineers end up doing. And was selling software in Japan for a couple of years. Till I came back to Bangalore in 2000 and realized that every friend of mine, every other guy that I knew was doing a startup. So I realized that if I don't do a startup and if I don't be an entrepreneur, maybe I lose this moment. So struggled to find an idea. But, connected a few dots and stumbled onto this whole idea of setting up an assessments company, a people testing entity called Meritrack way back in 2000. With a couple of friends and colleagues, started off Meritrack. Went through the usual roller coaster ride. Several near-death experiences. I mean, we did so many things wrong as an entrepreneur that INSEAD wrote a case study on us on what not to do as entrepreneurs, which I used to go as a bakra in that class. Teaching students and getting ripped by them. How could you be so dumb? I'll say, hey, welcome to the party, right? But hit the wave. The IT and the BPO industry grew rapidly, and our service of building and assessments and providing testing as a service took off rapidly. And by 2005-06, we were one of India's largest skills assessments entity. We had tested over about 3-4 million people. So we were, in a way, looking back, one of the first edtech startups. Got invested by HSBC private equity in 2005. Met a friend who had joined as the CEO of Manipal Education in 2007. We started talking and realized that Manipal and Meritrack had common interests in assessments. We said, why don't we just put both the entities together and figure out what happened? So we eventually ended up being acquired by Manipal in 2011, and I completed one cycle as an entrepreneur. Interestingly, Meritrack continues after 22 years. It stays as a fully independent unit of Manipal, and we've tested over about 50 million people so far. So it's a fairly large enterprise. My colleagues who joined me way back then are still a part. So 2013, I was asking myself the question, what would I do if I took money out of the equation, right? And naturally so, because I had seen talent up close. In my worldview, some people were employable, some were not. In fact, we had put the India's first employability report way back in 2005. I chanced upon an experiment a bit earlier, during this run-up of a friend of mine called Sunil and Rajesh, who were setting up an entity to train rural youth to do BPO work. And they came to me referred by someone. And I almost fell out of my chair laughing, saying that, hey, you can't train graduates in Bangalore. What are you trying to train rural youth into BPO? But what I saw happen there changed my life, because I was able to see the transformation of literally a zero-educated, illiterate village youth who had never been to school, never held a pencil in their lives. In 7 months, through a very structured, intense process, morph into this wonderfully confident youngster who was speaking English, typing at 40 words a minute, and we were able to do a reasonably complicated process like insurance claims processing. And this just not happened with one, it happened with 8. And that's when I realized that how wrong we are in labeling people. To say this guy is employable, this person is not, when all that exists is unlimited potential. Right? And that, I think, gave me a direction to say that if I were to spend the rest of my life working with youth to unleash their potential, to build a much better world, with abundance and oneness, that can be the purpose that I was looking for.
Right.
And that's how I began the journey almost about 10 years ago. And it's like peeling the layers of the onion. One thing leads to another. You looked at youth. We were transforming them, but they were all struggling to find jobs in a Bangalore or a Chennai. And once they got here, the struggle was higher. Because how do you survive on a 10,000 rupee salary and make both ends meet? And we saw a lot of youth heading back to the villages. And that's when the idea of saying, why don't we start something in the village that will create opportunities for them there came in. And we actually started out with a for-profit entity called V Village BPO, trying to do a BPO work, didn't scale, shut it down, then stumbled onto last mile delivery and e-commerce. And that's how OneBridge as an enterprise was born. And today, OneBridge, we are in about 75 districts and work with about 12,000 plus entrepreneurs. Now, as we were doing that, realized that, why should there be only one model of entrepreneurship? Maybe there are several other models. And that's when my partners, Ravi Venkatesan and Macon, we got together to say, why don't we conceptualize GAME as Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship to look at creating a platform where any model that spurs job creation and entrepreneurship, can we help unleash that potential?
Right.
And GAME has been on for the last 3.5, 4 years.
Right.
Which led me to youth as changemakers and saying, hey, why stop only at entrepreneurs? What if we unleash the power of youth to actually become social changemakers and therefore entrepreneurs?
Right.
And that kind of connected the dot with UNICEF, which had just launched Generation Unlimited. And I was fortunate to be a part of the team that really created UI in India. So that's how it's in hindsight, obviously everything is 2020. But I think you just learn to live every day, figure out what is the learning you can take from that day to the next day.
Right. You said peeling the onion. I want to go back to that. So journey started with assessment, moved into individual transformation, and then you moved into entrepreneurship to create jobs. We'll come back to the peeling the onion and the tears which were shed around it in a little while. I want to bring my co-host Raghu into this. Raghu, what was your first meeting with Madan and what's your impression?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around 2014-15. Right, it was as a part of the social venture partners. I think when you talked about this rural BPO, etc., I think go back to some of our engagement. I think my first impression, as a part of this threefold model which we are working on, I think Madan comes out with a person with full of possibilities. Abundance is what ideation, collaboration, and anything to do with any new ideas, solving the problem, and then say, how do we find solution? That's something which I come to my mind. Every time I meet you, I go with a lot of energy. And one of the key things which I always link, and then he also shares that is about complex adaptive systems, right? So when we talk about the Wicked show, I think that's something which comes to my mind. Madan, great guy to be here, right? We're talking about complex adaptive systems. And one thing I just wanted, every time there's an energy, there's a new ideation. Have you ever said no to anything?
That's my problem. Now, this is the only question I can truly answer no.
And I'm glad you didn't say no to this show. Thank you.
That's Madan for me. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a very similar kind of feeling. What I had. Once somebody meets you, right? I'm sure the youth will feel the same way. But there's so much energy and exuberance that you bring in. And I want to go to the depth of that. Where does it come from? Could you talk a little bit about your family, your background? Who are the influencers who made who Madan is?
No, that's an interesting question. I think definitely my parents. My father was an entrepreneur. I have seen him struggle. We come from a very lower middle class family in Chamarajpet. I've seen my dad business go bust twice. There were months when there was nothing on the table. and my mother used to figure out how to keep us well fed. I've seen that resilience, right? But somewhere along the whole journey, I've also seen, so it's interesting that after years of struggle, we finally reached a space, and my dad decided to turn a humorist. So he's a music lover and a humorist. And now I look back and realize that, listen, that sense of humor and that ability to take things a little lightly even when things were going wrong is a very important characteristic, right? So somebody told me beautifully, it stayed with me all these years, that life is too serious to be taken seriously. Right? I think we end up giving it too much of bhav. Right? That's one part. The second thing is, this is again a very distinct memory of mine when I was barely 3 years old or something. And, in those days, water used to be scarce. And my dad, mom used to go out at 4 a.m. in the morning, collect waters in large tanks and bring it home. And I remember playing with a ball and accidentally knocking off the entire drum of water.
Right.
And it kind of flooded the house, the small house that we lived in. And I was cowering under a table thinking that I'm going to get the spanking of my life from my mom. And all she did was call me out, give me a hug and says, it happens, don't worry. Right? And the whole aspect of empathy, that there is always another perspective. Right? What you see is not necessarily the entire story. I think that incident stayed with me, that whenever I listen to somebody, I'm always trying to think, okay, what will it feel to be on the other side? And how do you really feel that situation, right? But at the end of the day, Shiv, I think over the years, it's been meeting folks like you. And it's fortunate that in this world that we operate in, we end up largely meeting positive, energetic people. Otherwise, you can't be solving the wicked solutions here, right? I think I feed off the energy that surrounds me, right? And I think it's mutually energizing, right? It's like a wonderful cyclical loop, a great virtuous loop that you get into.
I think the problems you're solving are also very deep, quite wide, and also long term, right? And therefore, you're absolutely right. But one needs the kind of support and energy which is required to do it. Madan, what is that? I know you hinted at it, but I want to go back to what is that one wicked problem that you are trying to solve in your current part of your career?
So I think the large problem that looks wicked is how do you solve to unleash the potential of youth who India and the world is blessed to have. Right? I mean, in India, we always have talked of a demographic dividend.
I agree.
We know in the next 150, we'll have 150 million youth entering our workforce in the next 10, 15 years, which is a massive opportunity, right? If you take the potential of every youth and you were to unleash that unlimitedness that exists there, imagine not just the economic wealth that will create, but the social power that it can generate. So if I were to just encompass the problem statement or the wicked problem in one line, it is how do you unleash the infinite potential of youth?
But that sounds like an opportunity. Where's the problem?
No, so the problem is in two, three ways here, Shiv. And as you say, every problem is an opportunity in disguise. And every opportunity brings its own set of problems. Sure. I think there are three problems we need to address it, right?
To unleash the potential.
To unleash the potential. Right. One is that, unfortunately, the systems that surround the youth, as you go deeper and deeper into the rural hinterlands or deeper and deeper where opportunities do not exist for youth, our youth are growing up hearing a lot of noise, which includes our education system, that they are not good enough.
Right.
And it's a complex problem that I am not good enough. Comes from a variety of systems around you. Right. From the society around you, from the education system around you, from the news that you hear, read, right? So how do you then instill that sense of worth, that esteem, that confidence?
Which is the first step towards agency.
Absolutely. That self-belief that, yes, it's almost like the transformation. One of my favorite all-time movies is Kung Fu Panda. Right? It's almost the transformation of the panda into the dragon warrior. Right? I think that is one. Because without that, nothing is possible, right? The second problem is once you've unleashed it, how do you connect them to opportunities? Right? You've tapped into a potential, but you need to convert that potential
into something solid.
Into something solid, into some economic wealth that is created for the individual and the family, right? And where do those opportunities lie? Right. Today, the narrative is that either you go find a job, or you migrate to the large city, you'll find something, right? So the second large problem that we have to solve is how can you find meaningful economic opportunities in your own village, which is, and I, in a way, abhor the word livelihood. I'm not talking of livelihoods. I'm talking of economic growth. When you and I, or any one of us go apply for a job at an Infosys or a IBM or a Google, we don't go and say, give me a livelihood. Yeah. We're saying, give me a career give me a job, I want to build my career. Right? So I think that's the second large problem. That how do you then bring meaningful work into play on a sustained basis using tech, etc., right? And the third problem is that, and therefore the opportunity, is that youth largely have been spoken down to. And most of the systems have been designed, unfortunately, without the youth in them. There's somebody else writing the education policy, somebody writing the youth policy, somebody telling the youth that, this is what you should do. Where is the youth voice in all of this, right? If we can bring that youth voice to the square and center of this conversation and really look at them not just as human resources, not just as job seekers. Of course, we have to look at them and all that, but if we can really look at them as change makers, right? And to say that, listen, how can you imagine a better world for the people around you? And how do we then develop the system around them to start recognizing these youth as having that potential as well? So I think if we can solve for these three layers, that's what my life is largely revolving around.
So one, fundamental, you're beginning with the youth itself.
Yeah.
And their self-worth and agency. The second is you're looking at job to economic growth, which is about taking that potential but applying it in a job so that they get economic independence. Yeah. And the third is where the youth and their voices are heard. Exactly. So they can design things which are relevant to them.
Yes.
Right? I want to bring Raghu in here. I've always never get bored when you say people at the center. What are the things which Madan says resonates with you, Raghu?
Absolutely. I think goes with people at the center, and then sort of can we start looking at
not a beneficiary approach.
Youth at the center, as change agents. That's amazing. I think we have sort of categorized them within our own lens, and so put them into a particular hole, saying that these are the people who will come like this, and all of them are going to be like this. Rather than looking at what their potential is, I think if we start looking at from youth's point of view, and then put them in at the center and start looking at it. I think what are the enormous possibilities which can come out of that? I think job economic is very important, but how youth can help themselves, right? And how they can, it's not that they cannot plan for themselves. Their aspirations are many times, most times is quite different from what we think or the policymakers think. I think to that extent, exactly. So I look at it, resonates very well with people at the center concept, and more importantly, sort of looking at their strength and potential than categorize them into something which only they can be brought in only here. Yeah, I think very much, in for it. Yeah.
Going back to Japan, do we need scenarios like that for youth? Put you in an uncomfortable place, in a country where you can't speak the language and you're a vegetarian, in a country where it's not very well understood. Do youth need that kind of a challenge also, or are we mollycoddling them, as somebody will say?
I absolutely think so, that we need to push people out of the comfort zones, right? And that's when the creativity, the innovation comes into play. I mean, just as an example, it was funny when they said you're going to Japan only because I dealt with Japanese customers in my previous company, and all I could say was Ohayo gozaimasu or whatever. And so I'm saying, hey, a teetotaler, vegetarian, non-smoker, who doesn't know a word of Japanese to save himself, and you're sending me to Japan, right? I said, go take the challenge. And obviously this is 99 where there's no internet. All I had was a dusty old directory, right? That is the only English directory I could lay my hands on. And I remember for 2-3 months, all I did was just pick up the directory and make 10-15 calls every day. And most of my conversations used to start with, does anybody know how to speak English in your company? And then I used to hear, ego wakarimasen ka, and you bang the phone down. And after 15 days, I realized that's an opportunity. So I started to change my pitch to say, does anybody in your company want to learn English? And almost say, my CEO. So that's how I started getting appointments. And for the next 3 months, all I did was to teach CEOs, how to speak English. And they were curious about Ramayana, Mahabharata. So you turned a disadvantage as an example, right? So,
But that's because you had the confidence, which is something you mentioned.
yeah, but it is see, when you're pushed to the wall, Shiv, you never know what emerges. So in Heddle High, for example, how do we select people? You are taking zero educated illiterate villagers, you can't ask them any questions. It's fun, our selection processes are funny. So we get a person in and we say, hey, who's your favorite actor? Everybody has one. Who's your favorite movie? All we say is, please enact a song or sing a song from that movie, and we are here. Sometimes it's taken us 2 hours for that person to feel confident to come. And we say, now that you come in, you are not letting you out. So we are ready to stay here for 6 hours, 10 hours. Once they start doing that, as a simple example, they realize that, listen, I never thought I could do this in the front of...
I'm not applying for a job with them.
So
that's amazing.
I think...
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think, therefore, how do you create conditions in which you encourage youth to step out? But also there has to be some kind of a safe zone in a way.
Right. Push them, but give a safe zone, but bring that potential out.
Yes.
Right? And constantly look for that. I think the other thing I always wondered about, whenever I've met you or seen you in action, I was just giving a example of your empathy when we were coming back in a flight together, that you saw, you could have taken a 4-seater and you saw a child and parents with them, and you actually went to them and said, if you would like to take that seat, I will go take something else, right? That's true empathy. The construct around empathy and confidence, right? Empathy, you gave me clues from your own parentage. Where does your agency and confidence come from, Madan?
See, I think it is again in a way a learned behavior, right? I used to be terrified of public speaking in my
I
sixth
can't
standard.
believe this.
No, I used to go onto the dais, and I used to have tight tongues, wobbly legs.
Right.
And there was one teacher who took me in and said, listen, why are you so scared? I remember still the sessions I did in his room, in our teacher's room. Where he said, now you speak. And then he gave me a few tricks to say, half close your eyes, don't look at anybody, think. So the next 2-3 debates, he was the one sitting right in front of me, and I was like super confident that I've spoken to him, I can do that. And then I grew out of the thing, right? So where I'm coming from, and I think this is an important part as a system.
Right.
And I'll give you another example. This is again a slightly different one, but it brings another aspect to it. That when I started off Meritrack, I had no clue of HR recruitment assessments. 3 of us, one was selling software, the other one was selling carpets. I mean, I was doing sales in Japan. We hit turbulence during 2001, 9/11, and we were almost on the verge of a shutdown. Right? I remember going to a Thai meeting, and that's why I have such an affinity to the networks.
Right.
And I met this gentleman, I don't even know, I'm sitting next to him. And in the break during this session, he made the mistake of asking me, how are you doing? And I burst out my heart. I was carrying so much of load. We went for a coffee and I almost literally cried, saying that I have to shut down my company tomorrow, no money.
Right.
All he did was 5 minutes, took me to a corner, put his hands on my shoulder, tell me your idea. And I told him this. He said, it sounds like a great idea. Right? Why do you want to give up so early? And I am here to help you. And he did. I still remember the gentleman became a terrific friend, Aprup Sen Gupta, who later on, went on to run some really large BPOs. And that moment changed for me. I said, listen, if this guy believes in me, who am I to distrust myself? Right? So where I'm coming from, Shiv, is that, and I could recount several instances like this. So all I'm saying is it requires a kind heart for somebody around you to give you that sense of comfort and saying that, hey, listen, why are you distrusting yourself? I think each of those feedback loops really can. I'm just thinking that if that teacher hadn't happened to me, and 6th standard, 7th standard, I still couldn't do the debates, I would have felt that I'm never able to make this.
Wow.
So, or if Aprupa hadn't met him that day, I would have shut down Meritrack the next day, and I wouldn't have obviously been here.
What's your very high in life till now? I'm sure there are going to be more highs, but what is that day you remember, unable to sleep because of happiness? What would that day be?
I was about to say 6 shots of tequila, but that's a story for another day.
That's another story. Yes. Fake tequilas.
Several instances, and maybe again in a defining moment. Again, as I say, God acts in mysterious ways. So it's a funny situation, but it happens to many of us. Maybe don't recognize it. So 7th standard, I was an okay student, but I got hit with typhoid during my final exams, and it was not a board exam, but it was a diocesan. I studied in a convent school, and I still remember writing those exams sitting in a single room because I was still in feverish, and my mom sitting outside with a glass of glucose water and all that, and I had no clue what I wrote, how I managed through those exam days, because school was very clear: if you miss it, you have to repeat the year. And I didn't go to the school till the last day, and obviously no phones, nothing those days, to collect my results. And I still remember my mom telling me, this is the last day, even if you failed, it's okay, you'll repeat the year, you come. And then I went in, the teachers were all saying, we have been waiting for you all these days, where are you? What happened? And I scored first in the entire, not just my school, but the group of 20 schools. And I still remember receiving a check. They had kept a check of 250 rupees, which I still have a photocopy. And it was a lot of money in those days. My school fees was some 7 rupees or something like that. And that hit me so hard to say, listen, this is not the Madan I knew. And this is somebody else. So, where I'm coming from is that there have been several instances like this. So, the point is that anything that happens, in whatever form that gives you an opportunity to take yourself to the next level.
Although it's a knock.
Right? And it could be the other way as well. I think in reflection, you look at it and say, that is the best thing that could have happened to me.
But you're not suggesting a typhoid for every student.
Though COVID came close to it. But
I know you did. And talk about one of those knocks which set you back for some time.
No, there's another very interesting story, and this taught me a lot about, we keep talking about Sthita Prajna and how, and I think one of the key traits of an entrepreneur is equanimity. It's interesting. So, 2003 or 4, we were growing pretty rapidly. And I had my first radio interview. This was on one of the radio FM channels, fairly large, and a live interview. And the recording was at 4 o'clock or something like that, I remember. And there's a lot of high excitement, preparation. And I was in a client meeting at 2 o'clock. This was one of our largest customers. It was a build-up, but I had not anticipated it. Something had gone horrendously wrong in operations, in messaging, etc. And at 2 o'clock, I was served a termination letter. So 50% of our revenue is gone from one customer. And this customer says, done, from tomorrow, no work. And I'm thinking, I have 40 people on this project. Where do you deploy them? What do you do? 50%. How do I explain to my board, partners, co-founders that was, Gaia, right? And I come out totally crestfallen, and I'm getting into the car and realizing, man, I have to go talk in that show at 4 o'clock where I have to be. as energetic as possible. That 1 hour taught me a lot. To say, how do you still take this hit? But how do you, and you can't fake it in a 1 hour radio interview. Right? And that preparation that I did for 1 hour taught me a lot. To say, yeah, even this is temporary. And in that thing, I was writing down list of 10 other customers I'll go get in the next 1 week. So then that 1 hour I had an action plan to say how we will overcome this. And that gave me the confidence that, hey, and I really enjoyed that 4 o'clock show. All the rest, internally they were asking, how did you manage? Because I did not tell them till the show was over. Just as an instance, see, the point is, I think I firmly believe that in every day, you take hits and you have highs. And I think as the beautiful poem by Rudyard Kipling goes, you have to learn how to treat these two imposters the same.
Madan, what's your battery charger? What is your motivator?
Difficult one to answer in the sense that for me, a few things, and I'll maybe reframe the question a bit. When I see the impact of the work that we're doing, whenever I visit one of the training transformation centers, or I meet our village entrepreneur, and their enthusiasm, their excitement gives me a huge surge of motivation. Right? The smile on their faces, the positivity.
The transformation.
Their transformation.
Right.
So for me, whenever I'm feeling a bit low, I make it a point to visit one of the centers or one of our villages. And you just spend a day there. You come back with 100 other positive ideas, etc. Secondly, I'm also trying to figure out how to keep the battery charged eternally.
It's not money, clearly, for you.
It's not money. It's not money. So I'm trying to figure out one of my favorite go-to places for any charging is the Bhagavad Gita, and I tend to write I begin every day by writing a shloka from the Gita and just reflecting on it for 5-10 minutes. I think the core essence of the Gita, that how do you separate out the action from the results, right? Because motivation is largely driven by the results, right? You get the results you want, you're motivated. You don't get the results you want, you're demotivated. I'm trying to figure out how do you find motivation in the action itself.
Right, but this is antithesis to donors. They want results from the actions.
That is the challenge. So maybe they need to read the Bhagavad Gita more than So the point also is, and maybe a larger question, right? How do we, as a larger group and a community, focus on doing the right things? And I believe that if you do the right things, the results will happen. The question is it the results that you defined that you have to happen? Because I find this whole, on a slight tangent, I find this whole predictability of results a little weird. Because the whole thesis of growth is co-creation. And the creativity that comes in when you're not trying to predict the future, but co-creating the future. So I find it, even when I'm now putting out a business plan for the next 5 years and saying, tell me how many villages will you be in? Of course, we have to fill all that, but I find myself laughing at it.
Right.
Saying, and sometimes the donor or the investor also says, I know this is all Excel sheet. You and I both know it doesn't.
When the computer industry can't predict its own growth.
Exactly. I saw a beautiful, I think it was Gates who had said that, or IBM would have said way back in 70s that there is a market of 7 personal computers in the whole world.
7 of all.
7 of all, right? Imagine. So, coming back to the question, I think if there is an internal mechanism to keep yourself motivated on the action that you do every day.
By the way, the computer story is based on the fact that technologists feel that the world wonders are created by them. And there are 7 world wonders. So they came up with the 7 computers probably.
Yeah. On the other side, what frustrates you? And so how do we deal with that?
Yeah. What frustrates me is really negativity. right? It frustrates us and it saps you, right? You meet people, yeah, it's an energy drain. Like how you said, there's a battery charger. There's a drain when you meet people who are largely negative to go with. It also frustrates me when people are still in the problem mode rather than the solution mode.
Not looking at the possibilities.
Not looking at the possibilities, right? And lastly, what frustrates me is lack of empathy. Right? When you're realizing that, listen, I'll put it another way. What frustrates me or what gets my goat is the ego. All of us fall into the trap, but sometimes that hits you so hard to say, hey, there's a much larger problem that we need to solve rather than figuring out how well you appear in that. Right? And, I happen to, the only way I think dealing with it is, I happened to attend a wonderful coaching session by Marshall Goldsmith, the renowned leadership guru. And all he says is, listen, whenever you encounter a situation, take a deep breath and let it go. Because that's nothing that you can do to control it.
Vedanta in action.
Yeah, it's your problem, right? And you have to deal with it.
Right. I like one problem that you put across in LinkedIn post once. I think one of the donors stood you up and didn't turn up for the meeting, right? And I liked your post. You never named the person. You never named the organization, but you called out that behavior, right? Is this one of those things which frustrates you in terms of...
Yeah, this whole power equations, right? Or I'll call it the other way around. Maybe the humility of it.
Or the lack of humility.
Or the lack of humility.
Right.
I've always wondered, why are great people so humble? Then I realized it is those who are humble become great. So this whole aspect of the equation that I am the donor, you are
the recipient.
Or it happens in our mind that I am the one who's delivering that service, you are the beneficiary. Right? Or the equation that, I'm the older guy, you're the younger guy, you listen to me. This whole aspect of, the lack of respect. I wouldn't even call it lack of respect. It is that thing that you put yourself above and look at the world as something below. That is... Yeah, I remember that post. I mean, there was somebody who had given a meeting. I showed up, waited for an hour, didn't turn up. And there was not even a single email or a phone call to say...
Yeah, I felt empathy to the post. So, Madan, what is that one superpower if you had, which will really, really help you do what you do? And you don't have it. I believe you have several, but the one you don't have.
How to grow my hair. But jokes yeah. See, the whole aspect that I struggle with and I wish that I had that superpower and trying to develop that in a way is, how do you convert the dream or the vision or the possibilities into executing strength on the ground? Right? I mean,
the intention to impact.
The intention to impact and to be executed well. A lot of transmission losses happens between the idea generation to idea, translation and executing on the ground. And, and then the whole feedback loop. So what I struggle with, and sometimes I wish, and there are, one of the things I've been fortunate with is to have people around who are able to take that and deliver that on the ground. But again, there is... So if I wish I had a magic wand to say, you do this and XYZ happens on the ground. Yeah. I think that's where the thing is. And of course, the other, I'm sure all of us would want to have that superpower is to do what some magicians use to generate money out of thin air. Do this and...
That too for a good cause.
That too for a good cause.
So if you have one day left to do a particular work, what would that be?
Difficult question again. So I have probably three answers. Ideally, I would want that one day to go exactly as the day I live every day. So, one of the...
Which means do 3 things in one day.
or maybe do everything that you want to do. So one of the visualization that I do every morning is to say that, or every night, is to say that if tomorrow is the last day that you're going to spend on earth, what would you do? And if that day ends and you have to be reborn the next day, would you have any regrets for the day? Right? So I think especially post-COVID, there's been this realization that, listen, you have to stay in the present and live that present fully. Right? The past is gone, the future is unknown. It's only the moment that is the present, right? So that's one dimension. The second dimension is, if anyway you had one day to live, you might as well make the best out of it. Right. Spend time with the loved ones, etc. And the third dimension is, which is an extreme one, that if you had only one day to live and you know that you're going to die, you might as well take all the guys who are doing harm to the world along with you.
That's a nice one. That'll be a large group, though.
That'll be a large.
Okay. Now, I'm going to put the same question a little differently. If you had a Control Z, which is, undo what you can do, or press Control Alt Del and, go back in time, what is that one thing you will change about your life?
Very little, Shiv.
Wow.
Very little. Right? There could be some instances that you would wish that you had not done that. Right? But apart from that, broadly, if I were to live my life all over again, I'd probably make the same choices. I don't regret or look back and say I should have done that I should have done that.
Is it because your basic personality you don't regret anything, or?
I think so.
Or you made conscious choices?
I made conscious choices, and two, see the again, one of the realizations is also that that there is always this law of unintended consequences that occurs with every choice you make.
Yeah.
Right? And when you think that I should have done that, it is not a single fork in the road, right? There are multiple choices that emerge. Right? So if I were to go back and look at each of the choices made, at that point of time, you think that some other choice would have been better, but you never know what the choice would have led you to.
Right.
So again, coming back into the present, if I'm happy in the present moment that I am in, then I made all the right choices so far. If I'm unhappy, I still have the power to make the choice right now to correct that.
And which you have done.
Which is a continuous
process. Yeah.
Right? So I think that's it's been an evolution. I mean, sometimes I used to think that, hey, maybe I should have cracked the IIT. Maybe I should have gone off to the US or whatever. These are all various choices that friends have made. But I think that's to me, the test of time is now. This is here and now.
Super. Yeah, so with all that 100, 200 things which you do a day, how do you manage your time? And we talked about the energy, but more importantly, your time and the emotions. How do you manage that?
So, yeah, it's a question that I get asked and I ask myself. See, again, going by this day philosophy, see, two parts in the way I look at it, right? For me, the mission is important. For me, that every youth a transformed youth, every transformed youth an entrepreneur, every entrepreneur a change maker is the mission. And I have that purpose of my life, which is to look at the unlimited potential, right? All the things I do, be it at Headed High or OneBridge or GAME or UNICEF or the work I do for the government, to me are vehicles to lead me to the same destination. So in my mind, there are no compartments. Right? It's all one seamless flow. Right? So I can switch organizations very quickly. because many times it's the reiteration of the same thing. So
in a different way.
In a different way. So one argument which I find hard to convince people, and especially my wife, is to say, "Oh, it's all a part of the same thing." And she says, "You say that for everything."
That was my question actually. How do your staff see this, staff and the teams?
Yeah. So the challenge comes when you get into the execution of this. Right. And for me, I again take one day at a time and say, what are the three most important things that I need to get done today? And I allocate my time accordingly. Right. There'll always be, swingers that come from where you don't see saying, "Hey, tomorrow you got to do this," and I just go with the flow. Right. I think for me, any time. So the only way that I measure myself at the end of the day is how much of time did I spend on things that didn't directly result in making a difference to the lives of people that we are supposed to make an impact to. Issues like dealing with people challenges and internal fights and misunderstandings, to me, are a huge waste of time. I mean, it obviously has to be solved, but the underlying question is, why did we have to get there at all?
That is empathy, not an operation.
Yeah, and it's wasting that 1 minute that you have to be spent on non-value adding stuff. So my only measure for a day is, did I spend how many hours or how many minutes of the day did I spend in a value adding role rather than a non-value adding point. So
just to continue that question, so if you were to be given a choice of managing your time or your emotion or your energy, which is your predominant method?
I think it's managing energy.
Energy. Okay. And then time gets managed.
Time gets managed.
Right.
I think it's always that I love this dialogue from Tezab way back when we were growing up. I think Madhuri asked Anil Kapoor, "Aapke paas time hai?" And he says, "Time kisi ke paas nahi hota hai, time nikalna padta hai."
What do you prioritize for that?
Right? So you take time out for that day,
right,
for what makes the most sense to you.
Right.
Right? And I think I'm a firm believer in the whole energy equation, that if you are able to carry that energy with you, emotions and time get managed.
Right.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. So, as always, it's been great listening to your journey and also your reflection on various things which you have gone through and the learnings. I think looking at some of the young people who wish to sort of get into the social impact space or getting into sort of addressing complex problems, what are your suggestions to them on this?
So, a couple of reflections here, Raghu. There's no single formula or a single magic pill bullet. I love this quote which is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, which says, "Hey, you start by doing what is necessary, then you do what's possible, and then suddenly you're doing the impossible." Right? So, a lot of us, I meet a lot of youngsters who say, I'm doing this job, it sucks, it sucks the energy out of me 9 to 8. It is, I'm busy on weekends, but I want to do something. And I start off by saying, you create your own constraints. Even if you have 1 minute, it can be used in a way that it creates a ripple. Right? So don't worry about the constraints you have, look at the possibilities.
Right.
As I said, the conversation with Apru took all of 4 or 5 minutes, but it changed my life. Right? So can you, even when you're walking around talking to somebody, can you be that person who's trying to spread cheer and happiness around, right? That's one way to look at it. The other way that I say is start doing something. The second issue that I hear, or the pushback that I hear is, but I don't have an idea, how will I develop it? You don't have to have your own idea, right? Go to a cause that resonates with you, and many times you hear, but I don't know which cause. I said, take a pick. Try 10 things.
Do the necessary.
Yeah, and maybe you'll like the 11th one. So can you start volunteering for an organization? There are tons of organizations that are looking for people. Yeah, it can be remote. Now, especially in this world, remote is there. If you can spend 3 hours on a Sunday, can you bring whatever skill set you have to an organization? It could be a technology skill set. It could be a finance skill set. It could be an HR skill set, right? And third is that develop your own perspective. So can you pick an area and go deep, right? An area of your choice. It could be elderly care. It could be climate change or how whatever, right? How carbon credits or whatever. You pick any area, and can you then in 1 or 2 years say that I know at depth the issues in the space, right? So I think this whole aspect of being in the development space, I think being a human person itself is being in the development space. Even if you were to spend an hour doing something meaningful, do it. 3, develop a perspective. And then you start connecting the dots in ways beyond we could have imagined it. So it's actually pretty simple and does not require a complex business plan to be written. And I'm a big fan of the work of Saras Saraswati, who's the Professor Saras is the foremost thinker of entrepreneurial thinking. And the first principle,
Great theory.
the effectuation theory. The first principle of entrepreneurial thinking, she says, is start with what you have. It's called the bird in hand principle, and I think that applies brilliantly to every situation, including this.
Oh, yeah. It's about you, and then the action,
and
then
action,
the perspective.
and the initiative that you take, and the learning that you can develop from that.
How about your suggestions to the people who are in social development right now? So there is so much things changing, context changing, etc. What are your suggestions for them?
So I will take an extreme view. Don't think you're in social development. Okay, think that. So when again, just stepping back a bit, and this is an interesting reflection. So when a lot of people, when I moved from Manipal to the foundation and therefore set up this enterprise, I was asked this question: how do you think the world is different? You came from a for-profit commercial world to a non-profit or a social enterprise world. How do you think it worked? And I struggled with this question for a while to say, how does the world be different from an enterprise to a social enterprise? And I then realized after a couple of years that there's nothing called as a social enterprise. So in my worldview, there's an enterprise and there's an anti-social enterprise, right? And an anti-social enterprise is defined as an enterprise or an entity which does not have the DNA of a social cause or an impact embedded core into its philosophy.
Right. Or creating negative public good.
Or creating negative public good, right? Therefore, by definition, if you are in the development space, you are an entrepreneur in the enterprise.
Enterprise,
world.
right.
Right? And therefore, 3 questions that every enterprise has to think, you have to think. Who's my customer? How am I adding value to that customer? And is that value being translated into an economic value for me and for the customer? And is the cost of delivering the value? Am I able to control it and keep it lower than the value that I'm deriving? Which are the same questions that any entrepreneur will ask. Any enterprise will ask, right? Of course, in some cases, there won't be no economic value. There's a social value. But
it's value.
But it's
value to the customer.
But it's a fungible value in the sense that you're able to take that social value and generate an economic thing, right? So I think sometimes we get caught up too much in that, we are doing good, therefore we need latitude. In a way, I think sometimes all of us get caught in this web of self-righteousness. That why should we do so many reports? Why should we? I was recently in a meeting where I was saying, hey, all of us should keep timesheets. And one of them stood up and said, I come from the IT world where life was built on timesheets. I thought this is the development sector. Why should I keep timesheets? And my response was, maybe you need to do a better job of keeping timesheets because time is much more valuable here.
Yes.
Right? So we need to have a much more rigorous process of keeping timesheets here. So I think this whole aspect of I've come to the development sector and
therefore it will be easy.
And therefore it will be easy and therefore you can't ask me any questions because I am giving up.
Giving up, yeah.
so much of my life privileges.
In fact, the standard line which is given is that I've come here to give back.
Give back, yes.
Right. I want to give. What did you steal?
Exactly. Yeah, no, this whole aspect of give and get. We have to kind of get out of it. That there is, and that's the whole concept of abundance. Right? It's not about a transaction.
So this is a nice one actually, the enterprise and the anti-social enterprise rather than the social enterprise. So it's a great one. So finally what about your advice to people who want to sort of come into this space, social impact space from the corporate?
Come here as quickly as you can. Yeah. And give back. And give back all the money and the time. As you said, what did you steal? No,
any learnings?
No, my
Because you did that crossover.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of my colleagues try successfully and try unsuccessfully. They've gone back. See, I think 2-3 reflections, right? One, there is this romanticized idea that, I'll feel like a evolved soul when I come into the social. I met a friend of mine who says, I'm feeling the same way that I felt 5 months ago when I was in a corporate. Is something wrong? I said, no, you should not have expected it.
It's about the expectations, what you have in the
expectations, what you have. Basically, you're bringing the same skill sets.
Right.
You are the same, right? You have to make a difference there. Nothing is going to change. So I think there's this romanticized thing that, life is going to be very meaningful. I mean, meaning is what you have to fill.
Yeah, you have to derive it.
You have to derive it, right? Just because you work in one space, I think that's one. The second thing is, I think the aspect of what can I contribute is important than what can I get. Met a guy from finance who was saying that I've been a CFO, but I want to work on marketing. I said, which fool would want to take you just because you came from the corporate world with finance skills and ask you to do marketing? Just because you want to do marketing,
it's not a playground.
You're not again doing me a favor by coming in to say, I'm this great guy who's done fantastic things, so I can do fantastic things for you. Unless you see value being added. So the thing is that come with a sense of a contribution. And the third thing that I keep saying, and which is where we do work at the Sabarmati Ashram, is I ideally reflect on the purpose of your life. Right? What is the thing that you wish to see a difference in the world around you? And then play to the purpose. Right? And the purpose can be played in many ways. Right? So I think reflection on the purpose, coming with a sense of contribution, and not expecting any dramatic results overnight. But it's a journey. I think this will make sure that we are setting the equations right both sides.
Great. And you don't want any sides also, it looks like. In the sense.
Actually, there's no side.
Right.
As we were discussing the other day when Sri Ramana Maharshi was asked, how should we treat others? His response was, there are no others. We're all in it together. We're all one. So,
Madan, thank you so much. Thank you for doing the show with us. Thank you for being Madan. And thank you, Raghu, for joining in this conversation. Absolute pleasure. Before I let you go, there are two things I wanted to ask you. One is, we would like to continue this conversation with you with the choice of the next interviewee. So who would that be for you, Madan? Somebody who inspired you, who you think the world needs to know more about?
a lot of people who come to my mind. Maybe I'll begin with my partners at game itself. People like Ravi Venkatesan,
Right.
who made a conscious choice to move away from a completely corporate world.
A plush corporate
A
world.
plush and a high-level C job.
Right.
To a one where he was making conscious choices about the kind of causes he cares about and making a difference. And similarly, Macon Maheshwari, who left Flipkart at its pinnacle as the CTO, CHRO, and choose to start a non-profit.
Right.
Udyam, looking at young people.
Right.
I think these are
Should we have fun with them next?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Maybe we should get both of them together.
Maybe get both of them together.
Yeah.
And the second thing I'm going to ask you is something you ask some of your people within your program to do. You have such a beautiful voice. I would like you to sing a song of your choice. I had the benefit of listening to it a couple of times.
That I did not expect. It was not.
Not part of the
No,
script.
but I think I keep saying this is my favorite social sector song.
Right.
Or whatever, which defines the world for me. Is this song, I think, from Anari, which goes like this, right? किसी के मुस्कुराहतों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Lovely. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for hosting me on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and
Thank you.
keep doing the great work that you do.
Keep inspiring us like you guys always do.
किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है. किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है.